My name is Bera Nordal and I'm the director of the Nordic Watercolor Museum in Sweden. The museum is on the west coast of Sweden, north of Gothenburg, and it's on an island, so it's by the sea. It's a magical place, and we focus on works on paper and watercolor, and we have a very strong international exhibition program, and then we are building up a very important collection of watercolors of contemporary living Nordic artists. And that's why it's so important for us to show Lars Lerin here, because he's a very important part of our collection. Yeah, he's an artist that is now one of the most important in this area of technique in Sweden. He's the master of the watercolor, and he has a unbelievable, he's really a virtuoso there, and he does only works on paper and only watercolors, and he has been increasing more and more the size of his works. He's of course, the width of the paper cannot be more than a certain size, but instead, by trying to make them more bigger, he adds together many pieces, so he can really create monumental works of watercolor, which is very unusual. One is more kind of part of contemporary art, but not the classical one. And he has this kind of very flowing technique, what we call water on water, where he uses really the water to create the lightness and the transparency and the inner kind of where the light comes from within. So he really uses the technique to do that. But he also makes very detailed, he paints very sort of much in detail afterwards. That takes a very long time. The other process is very quick and very spontaneous and needs really a technical mastery. So in that way he reminds me very much of Nolde, Emil Nolde, the German expressionist, where he sort of has learned a lot from. And so many of these pieces, some are made very quickly, and some of the bases of many of the paintings are made very quickly, but others take a very long time. So it's a very varying how he works. Yeah, it can take weeks. Sometimes he's working on it for months, so he sort of goes back and forth and is maybe working on many pieces. So he maybe makes smaller ones. He writes a lot, so he's also adding. He adds texts are often very much part of his paintings, his sketches. So he has published over between 30 and 40 books, where he uses a lot of his sketches from his travels, his kind of diaries and impressions of people, and then he makes bigger ones. So he's working on many different pieces at the same time, and he's a very he works unbelievable. He's always working and always sort of thinking, always taking photographs. He uses a lot of photographs as a kind of, especially from his travels, as a basis for his works. So he's continuously doing something, from creating something. So the artist Lars Lerin is also the author of Lars Lerin, and so they go in to each other. They influence each other. So it's a very important aspect of his of everything he does. That's a little bit, yeah. I've known him for a long time. I learned to know him first when I did the first exhibition in 2003. Then he has gone through a big transformation, because he has then had great alcohol problems and drug problems, and he was coming out of that deep depression. And so we met, but we're not sort of working together very closely then. It went more through his father, who took care of all his businesses. But then he has gone through a really marvelous, really worked with himself and his, he's now married he has a new husband who is from Brazil, and he's there now with him. And they married many years ago, and they are working together, creating he is helping him with this place where he shows his works to in Värmland, where he lives, in Karlstad. But I would say that he's a wonderful person. He's very warm, he sees everything, he has a kind of attention to details, and you see that he transforms it into his works, and he has a way of always touching you. He's so true to himself. He has gone through so much, so he needs to be very true to his inner being, and that means that he has decided to be like that also to other people. And that means that he, often through his films and when he's interviewed, he really touches people, because he is so true to himself, and people feel that he is telling the truth, he's not faking anything. So he's one of my, I would say, a person that I'm very, very happy to have as a part of my life. Yeah, he is now almost a kind of a superstar, if I'm going a rock star, because he is, when we opened our last, I can say if I look at these 10 years since I opened the first exhibition, he was mostly sort of known on the West Coast, near where he comes from, that part of Sweden. But now he has his books are very kind of widely distributed, and sort of he's talking about them everywhere, and he has kind of also his life story has become a kind of what he often talks about, and he is continuously on TV programs, but he also is making a lot of shows himself, both on the radio and on the TV. So he is very well known as a person. And when we opened the exhibition for the summer 2014, I mean, it was so crowded, it was unbelievable. So and I think it has so much to do what I was talking about, about himself, that he is so true as a person, that he conveys something that people really so rarely see in the kind of the public sphere, that people are so honest and so true to themselves. And I think that kind of magical way of him, and he's very eloquent, that means that it's very easy for him to convey that to the public. So he is really, and of course his art is, selling us everywhere, but he doesn't sell that much, he holds very much for himself. So all of the main paintings are only sold to museums like us. So we own very important pieces. I hope that they really both see his greatness in this medium, how unbelievably skilled he is, but it's also because talent or skill is one thing, you also have to work for a lot to come to that point, and he has been working on this all his life. So this is, although these works are mostly from the past 3-4 years, it's still an accumulation of his whole life. And it's, I fell in love with his works first time I saw them. And it's, I think they really, there's something very emotional in them, that they transcend the mood. For example, if you take the chairs, which are only small pieces here in the exhibition, you really feel that the history of the chairs, the people who are sitting there, some of the chairs are closer to each other, others are just alone. So he can talk by painting just a chair, he can tell you so much. So his pieces have so many layers, and the mood of how he uses the color and how he paints, it affects you. And I think here in Minnesotan, in Minneapolis, where so many of Scandinavian people and Swedish people emigrated to and there's such a Swedish heritage here, I think they will see in many of the mood of the Nordic soul. You know, there is something also very, I would say, northern Scandinavian, from the parts of northern Norway, from the parts of northern Sweden, where you have this kind of darkness, and then you have this great light during the one part of the year, but you are always in this kind of in between light and darkness, and he likes that time where you are in this twilight. So he's really often in the twilight zone. So it's they can be sometimes very mysterious, they can be very open, they can be very emotional and something magical, but still there's always a kind of a layer that takes you to the next level. So I really hope that people will see that how, and also it's a great kind of, that also the person behind it is a magical person. It was a great surprise to see them here, because some of these pieces that are up here I've seen. We have shown some of the great part of them in our spaces, which is sort of white cube, and I've seen them in his spaces, his rooms in Karlstad, and I have seen some of these pieces in other exhibitions, but never in a mansion like this. And I have to say, they really fit here. It's really, there's something else that comes out. I always say that it's so important that art, that you never forget that art changes when you move it. And it changes not only between different exhibition venues, it also changes a lot when you move it from one country to the other. And of course, Lars doesn't have we know him in Sweden, so when you have an exhibition of Lars Lerin in Sweden, it's a big thing. But here we have to introduce him from almost scratch. But to have them in this mansion, I think it's very interesting to see them both in the Osher Gallery and see them here, because you see the difference, that you see other things. In a way, the mansion draws out some of the architectural elements, the decoration that is in many of these pieces, and also many of the details that are in these pieces, they become more evident when they are here. And so it's very interesting to see the contrast in this exhibition from the Osher Gallery and the mansion. So I was very happy to see them here. Like the piece behind me, and some of those who are here are from his, some are from the neighborhood where he lives, but others are from his travels a lot, where he takes photographs and uses the photograph as a kind of a model for then continuing that series. But then he has done this, which is a very important part of this exhibition, is that he went to the Natural History Museum in Gothenburg and took photographs of all the dioramas there, and then used them as to make very big series where you see stuffed birds in cages in these glass glass vitrines, and then also he has done pieces where he uses paintings by classical painters from especially from the Romantic period of the late 19th century, and especially one Swedish painter where he owns a lot of his paintings. So he has used both his own paintings but also paintings at the National Museum in Stockholm. The name of that painter is Markus Larsson. And he has used his painting and almost tried to paint them again, but with the watercolor. And the interesting thing is that it's like a completely new work, because when you transcend one work from being a painting to being a watercolor, it's a completely different thing. And then of course you can never copy anything. There is always a difference. So there is a huge difference actually when you have them side by side. But still, you could recognize them, that they are kind of the models for these paintings. And I actually love those paintings. They are very he calls it that they had a romantic relapse, and then it's like he went into a kind of a very strange part of himself. But it's he shows another side there of this, how he approaches nature. And so he really never paints in nature except smaller sketches, which we have some here, and sort of impressions. And then he transcends it into something else. And these dioramas from the museum in Gothenburg are really amazing, because he has taken a photograph through glass, and then you have a kind of you see the shadows of, so you have many layers. You have him who looks, you have the glass, and then you have the diorama or the stuffed birds or whatever it is, and then you have us, the viewer, and then you have the persons who made it. So you have so many layers of reality or not realities, which is so fascinating with those. So I actually think it's called Naturlera, those series. It's a part of we did a very big book too. And those are, so it's called natural learning, or nature learning. And he is, in those pieces, I think those are one of the best pieces he has ever done. And then there's another series which also I think is one of his main works, is the library. And that is also something that he photographs. He photographs in museums, in private homes. He photographed when he was at the museum, in the library. And then he paints it off. And that is also telling a story of the person who gathered it all together, the books that are there, the authors who wrote them, the cultural history, the dreams. So it's really a heritage and a storytelling that goes beyond many layers. So that is a fascinating series, and we are only showing a very small part. It's a huge series, and I think he's now done almost 20 works that are accumulated in a long horizontal line. And I am not so sure he will continue with that. I think that he has now stopped that series. But some of these series that he does, he adds to them maybe many years later, so they change. And that is also part of how he works, this kind of fragmented way of doing things, that you can show them in a very different way. You can show one, you can show three, you can change the order, you can add to them, and then you have something very quite different, like big installations. So it's a fascinating how he works.